I don't really know where to start actually today, because from having seen this morning's presentations, all of which were excellent as always, it strikes me that this headline is really a bit of clickbait as much as anything else, because what I'm about to talk about, to me and to TfL, is bold. It's different, it's amazing, it's a quantum leap in thinking. But to the people in this room, it's probably really dull and obvious, and actually just very, very mundane and transactionary. So, little bit of kind of warning there that there's nothing really exciting that you're going to see here. There's no videos, there's no fantastic imagery, imagery. Bit of a boring presentation, really. So there you go. So anyway, you decide. We'll see what happens later on. Before I start, last year I was here, and I thought I'd better check on what I actually said last year before I came up and started talking again, to see if any of it was relevant, if it hadn't been relevant at all last year, or if any of it is relevant this year. And I think some of it is, actually, because I did mention at the start, I thought I was being controversial, but I wasn't really. I was saying that I still think one of the issues of the out-of-home industry is that it's not audience-focused enough. Last year I said I felt we were still talking too much about the product, the poster on the wall, the billboard, whether it's digital or classic. And I sort of challenged everybody to think about whether they truly believed that that was the case or not. I think for me the jury's still out. However, what I would say is that in the coming 12 months, I can't imagine that Adrian's going to ask me to speak 3 years in a row, but if I were to be speaking here next year, I think I would be saying that yes, actually, guess what, we've moved on. We've moved on to an audience cell where audience is, if not the be-all and end-all in the center of everything that we do, it's certainly far more up front and center to what is to what the industry needs and demands. One other thing that I did say last year was that the term out-of-home, I still believe, is out of date. And I think digital out-of-home now, because we're hitting a tipping point in the industry, as Sarah mentioned it right at the start, over 50% of revenues of most out-of-home companies within the next few months, if not already, are going to be digitally delivered. Why do we now demarcate digital out-of-home from out-of-home? Why do we actually talk about out-of-home in and of itself? I think in order for us to grow the industry, we still need, and this is sort of Alan from Outsmart and others, and Mark at the back there, this is a sort of challenge that I keep giving you guys and everybody else. I don't know what the answer is, by the way, but I still think we need to break out within the terms and the language of out-of-home and digital out-of-home in order to make us the industry that we truly can be. And seeing Dana's presentation earlier on, apart from it being terrifying, and making me realize that I am one of those middle-aged men in a grey suit that doesn't really know what I'm talking about as far as the future is concerned. I mean, I think the opportunities and the potential out there for a digitally or technologically driven industry are amazing. And so how do we get there? I don't know. So, what has happened in the last year since we last met? Actually, it was interesting. Last week we saw in the financial press the note about JCDecaux losing 8% of the share value after they announced that they were behind on the bus shelter rollout, the digital rollout in our estate. I think it's fascinating. I think it probably says more about the importance of the size of TfL as a landlord and the ridiculous situation of the markets than it does about being able to deliver digital out-of-home in London. I felt really sorry for Decaux in that respect. I mean, I must admit, I wish I had the Decaux family's financial problems, but so, they will get there. And by the way, they said at the beginning of the year that they would have 650 digital panels on our bus shelter estate by year end, and they still will be there. The issues, one of the reasons that, or a couple of reasons that they are coming into problems. One is, and I'll put my hand up, is TfL are difficult to work with. Guess what? You knew. And as we just heard from ITs as well, we don't make things easy, but we do it for a reason. It's for the right reasons. One example, they have digitized, or they are in the process of digitizing Oxford Street in terms of the bus shelters there. Of course, it makes sense to take out 3 or 4 bus shelters in a row and put them in. But we won't allow that because we can't have 3 or 4 bus shelters in a row out of service, because then that doesn't work. So you've got to do one, then you've got to come back the next week and do the next one. You come back the next week and do the next one. So normal rules don't apply with TfL, I'm afraid. So yeah, It's not all their fault, shall we say. Also, they're putting in bigger screens than they originally thought, 84 inches rather than 72 or 75, and more double-sided, because again, even in the time that since I spoke here, technology has moved on, and what they said they were going to put in the ground has been upgraded since then. And also, bizarrely, they got more approvals more quickly than they thought they would. So borough planning actually came through quicker. So they could reassess their estate. So that all will be happening, and I think it's really exciting that we are getting there. Also last year when I was here, we talked about the London Landscape tender that we just launched. So a number of high quality landscape digital panels on our underpass estate. Really exciting, sexy stuff, you know. Underpasses on the North Circular and stuff like that. Really, really rock and roll media. However, we awarded that to Outdoor Plus. The first panels will be in by the year end. At the moment, the first tranche will be delivering 11 panels and 6 sites. And we'll probably get round to doing a few more, up to 15 on 8 different sites around London in the coming months and years. So fantastic new infrastructure across our network. And also we formally brought PrimeSite into the TfL family. We retendered and reassessed the sort of bulk of our roadside estate, and that was everything from our roadside estate, just for those who don't know, covers everything from Storm's Chiswick Roundabout Towers to really pretty nasty paper and paste, 48 sheets under railway arches here and there around town. So we've got a bit of everything. So we reassessed that estate, we retendered it, we split it between DailyDOOH and PrimeSite, and there is a development programme now going into place and kicking into place, which will see a number of other sites upgraded and digitised there, as well as some just being got rid of. And there are various other opportunities across London which we will be taking out to the market whenever they make themselves apparent. One that's out there at the moment, or just recently tendered, was 175 Victoria Street. So, you know, all things going well, we'll have another fantastic, very high quality, amazing digital opportunity within Westminster. I guess you're not really particularly interested to hear much of that, because most of that's out in the market anyway. You've probably heard of all of that. The bold approach, the London audience. Last time I was here again, we were just about to kick off the tender for what I guess most people talk about is the London Underground contract. We call it the London audience, and that's for 2 reasons. One is it's not just about the London Underground, it's also London Overground, Crossrail when it comes on board, DLR, Croydon Tramlink, of course, and let's not forget Victoria Coach Station. Let's forget Victoria Coach Station. So coming back to the very first point, are we talking about the audience, or are we talking about panels on walls, or trains, or buses, or whatever? When we started thinking about the strategy going forward 3 years ago when I joined TfL, what was very apparent was that the industry was still in a state where it was about posters, and it wasn't really able to talk in any other language. Now, part of that from our estate was contractual. It was because that's how we had set things up. We didn't incentivize CBS as was, for example, in the LU estate, to do anything interesting, to invest in technology, or to think out of the box, or do crazy or wacky things. It just wasn't. It was just put the posters up, give us a check at the end of the month. And that was the mentality of TfL, and I would suspect the majority of landlords around the country, for however long advertising has been there, that was no longer fit for purpose for a number of reasons. One of them just kind of financially, it just doesn't make sense anymore. And I'll come on to that in a second. But more importantly, when we started doing some market research about how we were going to approach the contract, guess what? We actually asked the industry what they wanted. We asked agencies, clients, specialists, media partners, etc. And it doesn't take a genius to work out that actually what advertisers are looking for is the audience. They don't care about the posters. They don't care. Sarah mentioned earlier on, they don't care if it's a Clear Channel panel or a Storm or a Dakota. They just want the audience. And it struck me that TfL delivers day in, day out, millions and millions of possibly the most exciting audience there is anywhere. I would put the London audience, and that means visitors and people who come in and out, people who don't live in London. The London audience up against any other one that you care to mention. I'm pretty sure that we would be able to in a game of top trumps, I think I would probably win in pretty much most of the categories that we would talk about. So we put everything together, made economies of scale, which is great. We didn't have 8 different contracts about our rail business. We had 1. But also the real reason for it was, let's start talking about the audience. Let's make sure we can take advantage of, and we can take commercial advantage of, let's be honest, of the millions upon millions of touch points that we have every day with our passengers and with our visitors, so that we can get those messages across and therefore derive value for TfL, which then in turn derives value for London. About 4.5 years ago, again, not talking out of turn here, before I joined TfL, admittedly, but my boss, Graham, excuse me, always goes on about 4 years ago, we were in a place where we were physically and literally on the steps of the High Court with then CBS about the state of our relationship and the contract that we were running for the London Underground. Clearly, been well documented in the press, but that was a ridiculous situation for anybody to be in. We're now in the position where, having gone through an incredibly robust process over the last year and a bit, we're about to launch a partnership with Exterior, and again, no news there going forward, where the word partnership is actually meant, over the many years that I've been in this industry and other parts of the media industry, people have always talked about partners and partnerships, but they've never really meant it. There's always been just a contract that says, here, you do this and you do that. Very much like the old-fashioned way that DFL have done business across certainly the media world for many years. That truly and absolutely is different. We truly mean that this is a partnership. And we're doing that not just from being a more kind of touchy-feely and getting a bit more sort of hands-on, if you like, as far as the media is concerned, but also putting our money where our mouth is. TfL have taken on the responsibility for the capital investment across our network for the life of this contract. And that is significant. It's in the tens of millions of pounds. The reason we did that, and I think this is important, the reasons we did that were many. First of all, Richard was talking earlier on about cost of capital, slightly different thing, I guess, but we're not using the 3 Fs. Thankfully, because we're a public service organisation and we are who we are, our cost of capital is a lot cheaper than anybody else can manage to get their hands on. Even JCDecaux, there you go. So it makes sense, because I always firmly believe that the landlord is paying for the capital investment in their estate one way or the other. They're either paying it in cash or they're getting it out, it's coming out of the revenue share that they get back. So let's not fool ourselves. Landlords, one way or another, are always paying the capex. So it's cheaper for us to do that. The other advantage was it meant that we can spend it in the way that we want to spend it to an extent. Clearly, we're taking advice from our media partners, and I'll come on to a little bit about that in a second. But one of the problems that we had before was we tried to do too much too quickly. And we don't have to do that this time, because we don't have to worry about making the return on that investment within the first couple of years of the contract, so that we can make some money at the end of it, like a media partner traditionally would. So when we're talking about a bold approach, we're saying what we basically mean is we are reducing the risk. We're taking the risk away from our media partners to ensure that they can really concentrate on doing what they do best and not having to worry about financing the ever-increasing digital estate that all of us are seeing and talking about today across networks. And I think if there's one thing that is going to change in the forthcoming years, certainly in the bigger landlords and the estates like ourselves, and maybe Network Rail, maybe Heathrow, and maybe others, is that the landlords will take more accountability for putting in kit in the ground. And I think whether they want to or not, that is going to be the bigger issue, because digitization is going to keep happening. Brings its own issues, clearly, about commoditization and one or two of the other things that we talked about. But it is going to continue to happen. How can media companies, media sales companies, afford to keep doing that? Now, the bigger boys can, some of the others maybe can do it to an extent. Most of them are private equity owned. How does that whole dynamic work in the in the next few years? Be really interesting to find out. So I think our example, landlords taking accountability for it, putting our hands in our pockets, wanting to be involved, but making sure that the right things are done in the right ways, taking advice from the industry to make sure that actually at the end of the day, the money comes back in, because it's all about making money at the end of the day. Second point really is, and this is why it's different, we've moved away from a minimum guarantee model. In the 3 and a bit years that I've been at TfL, I probably spent the first 2.5 trying to convince TfL that the minimum guarantee was a bad thing. Having said that, we've got a big one with the bus shelter contract, so maybe slightly being disingenuous. But for this current contract, when talking about the rail contract, the London Audience contract, minimum guarantees were never going to work. And again, let's be honest, it was because it worked for us in the last contract, but it was a disaster for CBS. So doing the same again was not going to come up with the same results for TfL. The industry was not going to play that game. So guess what? We had to change the dynamic. Now, that's pretty obvious to everybody here and to anybody in the out-of-home industry. But for TfL, that was actually quite bold, shall we say. That security blanket that an FD has of having a check coming in at the end of every quarter is, very, very difficult drug to pull away from them, but we did it. We know that barring, a massive economic turndown through Brexit or whatever, that we will get more money as a result of that. But there are risks attached. So we again, are willing to take that risk. Every time you de-risk the contract from the media partner's point of view, it creates more value for me, for the landlord. And that's really what we were doing. And also, I think, it delivers a London audience. So again, back to the audience thing, I think the wider scope, as I mentioned, it's partly because advertisers, in the old days, they might have used a tube line as a proxy for a demographic or a type of client or type of audience. No longer valid, no longer worthwhile. The advertising industry generally is moving forward with the whole the whole digital world with smart devices, etc., like we've been seeing. Actually, it's really interesting that this morning, pretty much every presentation talked about mobile devices as much or more than they did about out of home. And that shows that's not a bad thing, that's just reality. That's just where they are inextricably linked, I think. And maybe when I mentioned about how we have to change the terms of out of home from just being about posters, whether they're digital or not, the language isn't right anymore. And I don't know what the answer is, but there are some of the super bright people, super smart people. I'm clearly not one because Adrian didn't name check me on that. There'll be other people in this room who can start to think about what that terminology might be. But I think we do actually have to do that, to try and make sure that we as an industry understand what the difference is between a mobile campaign, an out-of-home campaign, one clever poster campaign that creatively does a lot of brilliant stuff but drives all the revenue and interest to online and to YouTube and whatever. I mentioned that last year. I mean, it's an ongoing issue. Anyway, so wider scopes about targeting those audiences, making sure that we as TfL get the value out of it. And I think that there's probably a model here by which other landlords can start to think about how they approach contracts in the future to make the most out of their out-of-home opportunities. Right, so what does it mean? Global standards, a bit of, maybe it's a bit hyperbole, but I don't know. What we are going to do is spend tens and tens and tens of millions of pounds in delivering a world-class estate. I'll come on to a little bit about that. It's also about enhancing the customer experience. To us, TfL, customer still comes first. Putting the customer at the heart of everything we do, every journey matters, all these little phrases that might appear a little bit glib, but we are first and foremost a transport business. We've got to get that right, otherwise everything else falls apart. And I think doing this, spending the money, putting the advertising estate in the right way, actually enhances the customer experience as well, which is great. Data, really interesting talk earlier on from the legal side, Denton's, about what can and can't be done. We need to do more as an industry. We need to do more as an organisation, as TfL. We have got a lot of ones and zeros, binary code about what's going on around the network. Do we have enough insight? I would argue at the moment, no, we don't actually. We don't have enough. And we are absolutely working on that to help move forward and deliver what we need to deliver. Value for London, again, we are a political organisation with a small p. Whether we like it or not, the mayor is our ultimate boss. So it's really interesting to see what Sadiq thinks over the coming weeks and months about our estate and what he thinks we should be doing with it. You will see some of the, I know nobody's listening to this, it doesn't really matter. You will see some of the things that are being announced in the last week, even, since he became mayor. We at TfL obviously are one of the biggest part of the GLA, and I know our bosses and our commissioner had 2 packs, basically, depending on who won. And it was, here's the Sadiq one and here's the Zach one. Fundamentally, they're the same. This one just says, Zach, you're brilliant, and this one says, Sadiq, you're brilliant. And these are the things that we're going to give you. Really interesting. So, and we've, not me personally, but TfL and the senior people there have been working on it for a long time, so it's brilliant. Things that you will see in the Evening Standard coming out in the coming weeks. Great, we've sorted them all out months ago. All the mayor's good work. So Value for London is all part of that as well. And adjacent markets. So again, it's these touch points that we have in TfL. It's not just about advertising. We've got retail, we've got car parks, we've got Wi-Fi, we've got telecoms, we've got whatever else it is. You know, trying to be able to get commercial value out of those things through creative thinking, effectively. So, world-class estate. Significant sum. As I say, tens of millions being spent. And over half of it is going to be deployed in the next 2 years because we've got to make sure we don't fall over ourselves by trying to do too much too quickly. But I think we want to get as much as we can, realistically, done into the ground and earning revenue. We will be replacing life-expired digital displays, so the small format LCDs, 57 inches currently, moving to 75 or 84 inch, depending on which locations. We'll also be introducing a digital 12 sheet, so a 95 inch panel, landscape. Just looking at our exterior colleagues in the room to make sure I'm not talking utter bollocks. Also, digital landmarks, so above, so where we now currently have posters going at escalator barrels as one goes down, we're going to be digitizing most of those. But also digital expansion, so it's not just replacing, it's also getting more sites that are better placed. And also putting in some, what we're calling premium iconic sites, and the first one will be going into Canary Wharf towards the end of this year. So, and 1 or 2 people in the room today are part of that project. So, very large, excuse me, large format, digital panels suspended from Canary Wharf ceiling, all going well. I probably shouldn't have said that because actually we haven't done the pool tests yet, so we might not be allowed. But anyway, there you go. If I come back next year, I'll let you know it's there or not. More excitingly, of course, Crossrail. Crossrail comes on board at the end of 2018. 8 brand new stations in central London, massive cavernous places. The platforms are 200 metres long. So just remember to try and plan your journeys when you're on Crossrail. If you get on the wrong end of the train, you actually need to get a tube to get to the back of the other end of the train. It's massive. Been lucky enough to go down into a couple of the stations in central London to have a look around, and it's equally exciting and terrifying about the size and scale, what might be available and deliverable from a digital perspective there. One of the things that we're talking about, interestingly, is, again, a lot of people in this room know this, digital ribbons. So certainly in some of the LU estate, certainly in the Crossrail estate, rather than have individual digital panels going up and down the digital barrels, there will be one continuous LED display. Funnily enough, 3 years ago, we kind of committed ourselves to that, to the architects, before the technology was really able to be delivered in a sort of manageable way. So knowing that by the time it came around, it would be doable, and it certainly is. But all about it really is about meeting the advertiser's needs. It is about being able to have that flexibility and that dynamism that can give contextual advertising, etc., and targeted audience delivery that the market demands. So whether we want to do it or not, we have to do it, to be perfectly frank. Customer experience, what do we mean by that? Well, again, a lot of thought by our partners, by Experian, was put into how do we invest this money and not just get more kit in the ground, but actually improve the environments. They thought about this very carefully. We were very impressed by what they did. They went through a number of external consultancies as well as ourselves and looked at our own design idioms to make sure that they were doing and suggesting the right things. Obviously, the primary principles of customer safety and operational efficiency, etc., always came first. But looking at things like mirroring our design intent from an architectural point of view, reducing clutter, God, don't we need that? A bit more order and symmetry, all these nice words that kind of look great in front of design people and architects, but actually all it means is making the environment nicer. We all know here, advertising works best in nice environments. If we've got nice environments, the customers, the audience appreciates it more. It works better for the advertisers, which means they'll come back. It's not that difficult. So, and also looking at ergonomic principles of considering competing elements. So we get wayfinding in a lot of our stations are very complicated. We need to have tube maps there. We need to understand that most of the people who use the tube, the way that we use it, most people use it the way we use it, but there's an awful lot of people, millions of people every week who don't, who are new to town, who don't really understand it. So you need to have lots of maps, you need to have lots of wayfinding, things that compete with advertising. How do we make those things better? Data, talked about a lot. Again, nothing new here. Out-of-home, not accountable enough as a medium. I think we kind of sort of agree with that, I think. Certainly hasn't been in the past, certainly getting there. Somebody mentioned today it was about, guaranteeing rollout, making sure that the display happened. I mean, that's not good enough. That should be just taken for granted that the ad is run. It should be more about return on investment. It should be about whatever the metrics are that the advertisers and the clients demand is something that we can deliver. And it's also about being able to make sure that the value that we have in our audiences, again, I'm quite comfortable in having these kinds of conversations because of the audience that we've got. But being able to evaluate the London audience, if you like, and saying it is worth this amount of money to do this amount of activity is vital. And I think it's going to be increasingly more vital. And as programmatic takes hold to whatever extent, I think, again, whoever's got the biggest algorithm wins kind of thing. We need to make sure that we are at the forefront of being able to defend our estate is maybe the wrong phrase, but be able to justify what we do with our advertising capability. Another thing is internally, this has been an interesting one. Talking about privacy issues. TfL, again, terrified that we will be seen as being using data in the wrong ways. And quite rightly, we're a very trusted organisation, believe it or not. People in London actually, they trust what TfL tells them. And we don't want to jeopardise that, because by jeopardising that, we jeopardise our own right to be a transport network. However, it's really important that we do manage to get the knowledge about our audience to the level that we need to in order to make sure that the industry buys it, if you like, in all senses of the word. But also the way that we manage to get that across, I think, internally is saying that by knowing our audience better, obviously, it can help us from an operational point of view as well and make Londoners' lives better. A Londoner's life is better if the transport network is working properly. If it doesn't, we all know how horrific that can be. So a bit defensive, but also a bit progressive, I think. Value for London, again, we talked a little bit about the political bits of it. So just two examples, again, Media for Good. As you can imagine, we get lots of requests for charities and local, school fetes and local theatres and whatever to get free space. And of course, the politicians at the GLA love to sort of rattle our cage and say we're not doing enough for London. Well, we're formalising a lot of that. Pretty bloody obvious, really. It's always been there. We've always been able to do these things, but we're formalising it a bit more. So again, ticking the box with Zach. Sorry, Sadiq. Media for equity, again mentioned earlier on. How do we get equity? How do some of these startups be able to fund themselves? Well, again, nothing new here. It's been happening before from other media owners and from certainly more in other countries. But we are formalising that and getting involved in it. So startups who are maybe in their third or fourth round of funding, who are now getting to the stage where they actually need to get their message across to a larger audience, well, we can give them media space, promote their business in return for a share of their organisation. Again, making it more valuable for TfL, but also being seen to be helping the wider community that is the startups in London. Adjacent markets. So, as I said, we've got all these other things that we can do. So we've got a very important property development portfolio that's going to help build homes for London. Using the models that we've used here might be transferable in doing other and bigger and better things across the rest of our commercial opportunities at TfL, so retail, Wi-Fi, telecoms, etc., etc. Lots of other opportunities that we do, and having a partnership approach rather than an MG approach means that we can actually get the advertising side of it and our advertising partners actively involved in this. So it wouldn't have been fair of us to say to Exterion in the current contract, actually we want you to divert some of your thinking into how we can improve retail over here. Why would they want to do that? Nowadays, if it's Nike, for example, Nike Labs, who have this store and a railway arch in Shoreditch, if we're having conversations about retail with Nike, we're having advertising conversations with them, we're having sponsorship conversations about them. Why can't we have that more in the round and get more value out of it for London? Going forward, stuff that we're doing, and that's it. I've run out of time. Thank you very much.